Welcome, everybody, to this special presentation hosted by the Emerson College Alumni Association and the Washington, D.C. Regional Alumni Chapter. I'm Christine Del Favero, Emerson College's Alumni Director, and I'm very happy you could join us tonight. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping notes. To minimize background noise, all attendees are in listen-only mode. That said, we encourage you to submit questions at any time during the presentation using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Following the presentation, our panelists will answer as many questions as time allows. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Peter Loge, class of '87, political veteran, George Washington University professor, and active DC alumnus. Peter?
The host has stopped my video, so I think the host needs to turn on my video. Well, on behalf of the Emerson College DC chapter, thank you everybody for coming out this evening or staying in and tuning into to the webinar. We're really happy the DC chapter can host this event. All right, there we go. Now we're really happy that the DC chapter can host this event and bring in folks from Boston, Washington, and around the world, wherever you're tuning in from. I want to encourage alumni to engage with each other wherever you are. Engage in your local chapter, engage with the campus, and also engage through Emerge. Emerge is a new online community where Emersonians can connect, share, support, and celebrate each other. If you go to emerge.emerson.edu, as you see on your screen, find out what it's all about and sign up. I have to say, I've talked to a student this week through Emerge. It was really fantastic. It's a great way to remain engaged with each other and with the college. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dean Raoul Rice, Dean of the School of Communication at Emerson College, a tenured professor in the Department of Comm Studies. Before joining Emerson, before joining academia, Dean Rice worked for many years as a newspaper, television, and magazine reporter, editor for Brazilian and U.S. news organizations. As a journalist, he covered politics, sports, city news, science, environment, and other topics. I've got to know the Dean a bit over the past several years. He's a terrific addition to the college. We are really lucky to have him as part of the Emerson community and really pleased to have him with us tonight. So please, welcome Dean Rice.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of Emerson College's webinar series, Election 2020, The Road to the White House. As Peter said, my name is Raoul Rice, and I have the honor of serving as the Dean of the School of Communication here at Emerson. It's also my honor to introduce the leader of tonight's discussion, Assistant Professor Spencer Kimball, who teaches political communication courses at the undergraduate and graduate levels here at Emerson. Spencer is also the director of Emerson Polling and the advisor for the Emerson Pre-Law Society and the Emerson College Polling Society. As director of Emerson Polling, a role that he has held since 2014, Spencer has led the strategic and innovative rethinking of how polls are conducted, earning broad national recognition as one of the most trusted and accurate public opinion polling organizations in the country. During the primaries of the 2016 US presidential race, Emerson Polling predicted the winner of 16 races in 8 states, a 94% accuracy. Then during the 2018 midterm elections, over the course of 53 polls, Emerson Polling achieved a 93% statistical accuracy and 93% predictive accuracy. So it is little wonder why Emerson Polling is so often cited by organizations such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, Forbes, and many, many more. Over the past year, under Spencer's direction, Emerson Polling has partnered with several organizations such as WHDH in Boston, Nexstar Media Group, the University of Colorado, the City University of New York, our friends at Blanquerna School of Communication in Spain, and several nonprofit organizations. Through its work with partners, Emerson Polling has measured public opinion on issues of public health, education, racial equality, and social justice, as well as electoral campaigns. In the light of that broad scope, and as the Dean of the School of Communication, I'd like to point out the value of polling as a vital tool for communication. In order to effectively engage with and inform any audience, it is important to understand that audience's knowledge, opinions, and values. Under Spencer's guidance, Emerson Polling has helped to set new standards for public opinion research in our society. And it's truly my honor to welcome him to tonight's discussion. Spencer.
Thank you so much, Dean Rice. That was very complimentary and very appreciative. My name is Spencer Kimball. I'm the director of Emerson College Polling. And we're very lucky tonight to be joined by 3 of our alums. And I always think of Emerson College as innovators. And we get to talk to 3 alumni who are innovators as well in our area of political communication. We're going to start with our first guest will be Sue O'Connell. Sue is a commentator, analyst. We see her on TV all the time. She's the explainer-in-chief over at New England Cable News. She's the co-publisher of Bay Windows, New England's largest newspaper serving the LGBTQ+ community, and South End News, a Boston Weekly, a WGBH contributor. We see Sue everywhere, and it's, you know, makes us very proud. We keep it up on our screen up on the 8th floor when we were on the 8th floor. But we welcome Sue back to Emerson, at least digitally. Sue, welcome. Any memories that you can recall from your days over on maybe the other side of the Common?
Yeah, well, I'd like to take this opportunity to say that I may or may not have been part of the WECB AM crew that may or may not have boosted our signal illegally so we could reach Beacon Hill and the Back Bay. I don't know anything about that, and I don't really remember it.
Well, I'm sure the statute of limitations has run on some of these, but we'll look forward to hearing your insights tonight. And we've got with us as well is Fred Baldessaro. He's a veteran of 5 presidential campaigns. When I saw that, I'm like, boy, I didn't think he was that old, but don't let looks fool you. He served in the Obama, what are we, in the debate already? Served in the Obama administration for over 5 years. Fred has been a frequent guest back in the classroom many times on our road to the White House. And Fred, welcome back. Any fond memories you have of your days gone by?
Well, the thing I want to say, I want to thank Sue, or maybe not thank Sue, for boosting WECB signal. I was one of the hosts of Sports Spectrum back in my day. And I think because of that boosted signal, we did have one person who called in. Even though we couldn't put him on the air, he'd call in to answer our trivia questions, and then we would mock him for calling in. So I think, you know, I was sort of ahead of where today's political scene is, you know, like 20 years ago.
Well, we're going to have a lot to talk about because obviously that scene is changing every time we watch, let's say, a political debate. But we've got one more alum with us, Miriam Valverde. She is a writer over at PolitiFact, a very popular site these days. She's focused on fact checking. In fact, she's been at PolitiFact since 2016. So this is her 2nd presidential cycle going through, and she's got a lot of great insights, not just on the presidential race, but Arizona Senate race, claims about immigration policies. And Miriam comes from the class of 2010. Welcome. And Miriam, any thoughts or memories you have of your time at Emerson?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation, and happy to speak with you all tonight. And my memory takes me back to my first day at Emerson. I remember as a transfer student, I walked in and I had no idea what to expect or what it would be like. And, you know, we walked into this class, intro to journalism type of class. And I wondered, you know, what a seminar are they going to give us today, what it's going to be like. And our professor, he, of course, introduced himself and gave us a basic overview of what the class would be like, and then said, okay, now you're off to the Common and to the surrounding areas, and go ahead. He gave us a topic and said, go interview at least maybe, I don't remember a specific number of people he said, but he said, you know, interview this many people and then come back with a story. So it was a very hands-on approach, and one that I still remember because I was so afraid, but happy for that kind of hands-on approach.
I can, you know, let you know, Miriam and everyone, what we still have that applied approach to the classroom. I mean, think no further than polling. Who would have thought students would come to Emerson to actually do math and not run away from it? So things change, but not the applied and practical experience that we give our students. So Let's start off, Miriam. So you are in PolitiFact. Obviously, we had the debate on Tuesday night. What is some of the way that you might go about looking at a debate?
Sure. Well, I think one of the benefits for us at PolitiFact, we've been tracking the candidates since they announced. PolitiFact has been around since 2007, and we fact check Trump and Biden and others pretty much every day. And the candidates do tend to repeat themselves a lot. So leading up to the debate, we, of course, go through the speeches, the tweets, any social media post or any public appearance that they have to get a sense of what they may say on the actual debate night. So we write fact checks in advance. And then once we hear them say the claim, repeat the claim on debate night, we of course make sure that nothing has changed. We do a little bit more research that same night, but we're able to give our readers a quick overview of the accuracy of the claim based on drawing from our own research that we've done leading up to the day of the debate.
And so talking about that debate, how many of you out there watched the debate? We have, I'd like to think most of us who've tuned in tonight to kind of look at a follow-up have watched it. And if we take a look, we've just done a poll up in New Hampshire, and we found that on debate night, roughly about 85% of people watched part of this event. And I guess as the pollster, I would want to know from my audience here, who do you think won that debate? So I know we're going to put up a quick poll question and let you answer that. And while you do answer that, I'm going to just quickly pivot over to Sue. And Sue, you've done a lot of interviews. You've been in the business. We talked about earlier, you've been watching presidential debates since Carter Ford back in '76. Mm-hmm. Is the debate process that we have today suitable for the type of candidates that we might be getting? Or do you think that this is more of a aberration and that we will go back to some of that more traditional debate stage presence that we've seen in the past?
Yeah, I hope it's an aberration, and I hope it's an aberration around the fact of the way that Donald Trump behaves and his total disregard for civic discourse. I think the debates are important. I think even when folks aren't watching, it's important to have them for people who do care about them. I actually watched with my 19-year-old who at the end of the debate said, "Is that normal?" Right? And I wanted to show her what used to be an aberration. So I went back and I actually showed her the 1992 town hall meeting, which was Bill Clinton, President George H.W. Bush, and Ross Perot. And if you recall, George Bush looked at his watch when somebody was asking a question, and people freaked out the next day that he was disrespectful to the audience. The woman asked a question about being a common person, and there's George H.W. Bush looking at his watch. How much longer am I going to be here? He was just thinking. And that was considered, not presidential and not paying attention and respecting the citizens. So I think it is important. We will adapt as we always do. That was also the year that Bill Clinton went on MTV and was asked if he wore boxers or briefs. And people freaked out because he actually answered. So we'll adapt and change, but I think it's important that we remember that what's happening right now is not normal. It shouldn't be acceptable, and we should really, really push to make sure we return to some sort of civility. How we do it, I think, is open. We should all be talking about new ways and innovative ways to do it, but we need to be civil, and I think it's all around President Trump's behavior that's really perverting it.
And so when we asked the question just now to our audience, it looked like about 80% thought that Joe Biden won the debate, about 7% thought that Trump won the debate, and there are some folks who weren't quite sure who won the debate. And what's interesting is, so in this audience here, where it's pretty skewed towards a Biden win, and most likely we're pretty skewed towards a Biden ideology. But when we asked the question in New Hampshire, it was interesting to see that the day and a half after the debate, we went in the field on Wednesday and just finished up this morning, and we found it to be fairly split. About 37% thought that it was Trump who won. 38%, 45% thought Biden. I mean, it was, so we always think about, you have these debates, do they have an impact? What type of impact? And we're lucky enough to have Fred Baldessaro with us. And Fred, you have worked on presidential debate prep. You have dealt with spin rooms. This year, there was no spin room for the candidates to go in afterwards and explain their way out of whatever they did on that stage. Could you talk a little bit about, the 2020 experience and based on your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is that poll about New Hampshire and where the voters come down is interesting. I was concerned as a Democratic strategist for a long time. I was concerned when the debate started. I thought Donald Trump did look stronger and more in command of the debate than Joe Biden. I thought Joe Biden sort of stumbled over some of his remarks in the beginning. He was trying to almost remember everything that he was supposed to be talking about, which is what you normally do in debate prep. For those who want to look behind the curtain a bit, I mean, debate prep or prepping somebody for a hearing or testimony on Capitol Hill, I mean, you have a lot of people involved. You have people who are putting together giant binders with all the issues and what they've said in the past and what the opponents have said. You rent out facilities in some cases where you will mimic that feeling. You will do debate practice at the time of the debate, so you know what it's like when you're on stage at 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever it is. You bring in somebody who will be that opponent, who will study the opponent's mannerisms, who will figure out what they think the lines of attack are going to be so that the candidate can prepare for the lines of attack. I mean, and I'm sure that's what all these candidates were doing.
Do you think both Trump and Biden did that, or is that more of a, Trump tries to go off that he is winging it. Do you think he truly is, or is there some?
I got to imagine he did something, because he had some lines of attack that he kept repeating. And the only way you do that is through practice. You know what you're going to say, and you know that if someone says, "Oh, I'm, for X," your line is, his line in the debate was, for the first half of the debate, the line was, "Oh, Joe, you've been in Washington 47 years, you've done nothing." He kept saying that. And I was actually surprised that Joe Biden didn't have a retort for that. You knew he was going to talk about how he was a creature of the swamp. So that had to have come up in debate prep. But maybe, I don't know what Joe Biden was thinking. And the other attack line that came later was Hunter Biden, just going after Hunter Biden over and over. And I actually thought that Joe Biden could have had an opportunity there. I told my wife as we were watching the debate, I said, this reminds me a little bit of Dukakis in '88, when he was asked about if Kitty Dukakis got raped, would he want the death penalty for that person? And he gave a very clinical answer, and it seemed like he didn't, love his wife. Joe Biden could have immediately, he tried a little bit with the Beau Biden stuff. But he should have said, you're not running for president against Hunter Biden. You're running against me. Talk about me. Talk about my record. Don't attack my family. And I think he would have won over a lot more people who are like, yeah, one thing that's off limits. Don't talk about my kids. So I think he missed some of those opportunities there. The question about who won, the one thing I'd say about that, I would say you can't really win a debate, but you can lose them. And if you look back even at 2016, Hillary Clinton, you could argue, won all 3 debates, but she's not the president. So, I think people, and especially in today's news cycle, people move on faster from the debates.
And do you think that might be, and Sue, you can certainly jump in on that, the news is kind of different. We don't have that press room afterwards. You don't have that kind of hubbub of all of the media coming in, the press releases and everything that goes with the spin room of debates. That wasn't really in the cards the other night, and kind of gave maybe the media a chance to frame it a little stronger than allowing one of the campaigns.
Well, we do have Twitter and Facebook and social media, which sort of edges out the spin room narrative. There's no narrative that campaigns can build when it's happening live, and depending on who you follow on Twitter, I kind of use mine as a news wire and an opinion wire. but people are forming and getting their friends' opinions in real time, which I think gives them the opportunity to make up their own minds. And then we sort of in the media chase it the next day about what people are thinking. I mean, how many stories have you seen this week of people's Twitter feeds during the debate rather than actually going out, as we have all done, to speak to people in the Boston Common about, you know, pre-COVID, about what they felt. But I would agree that the debates are important only, I think, when you're talking to the folks in the states that are the swing states who are undecided, because coming into these, at least for the past 20 years, you know, the debates haven't made a difference in the grand scheme of things. So it's all about that focused message to the swing state voter.
And so, Spencer, so one thing I'd say about who had the stronger debate performance, looking at the numbers that Trump got at 38%, I think the other interesting thing about this debate that you could look at from that night is Trump came out as the challenger. He didn't come out as the incumbent. And usually presidents, as Sue mentioned about George H.W. Bush looking at his watch, Barack Obama in 2012 against Mitt Romney at the first debate, presidents are so used to being at that point sort of coddled and respected and their opinion matters that they almost get a little soft and they tend to not do well at the first debate.
So we'll see if
like a challenger, and he came out, which is a strange role for an incumbent. And
yeah,
I think that's why people think he actually had a strong debate. He was fighting.
And that's an interesting point on the fighting. And to your point, incumbent presidents with tough first debates, you'd go back right to 84 with Reagan, and you all remember the second line in the debate, you know, second debate about not making age part of Mondale's inexperience, kind of won him back. I'm not sure. Miriam, you're counting the facts in these debates and the people not telling the facts. Are we looking at it that both sides are equally you know, violators, or is there a disproportionate amount of non-factual information coming from one of the sides?
Sure. At least when it comes to the debate, I think we found that given that one side spoke way more than the other, either through interruptions or at their allotted time, we found that, you know, more misleading or false statements from President Trump opposed to Biden. But there's definitely a mix. I mean, none of them had a perfect record. Both had exaggerations or some statements that were embellishments or missing significant context that was just not accurate. So we do see a mix, but of course, whether one candidate has more falsehoods on the other largely depends on how much they speak compared to the other candidate.
And did you notice a difference in time proportion in this debate, or have you had a chance to look at those?
We haven't done our own analysis, but we did see that, for instance, President Trump did have more speaking time. And in terms of our own story after the debate, we did have more fact checks of President Trump than of Biden.
Is this a similar trend? You know, what's great having you on this panel is you were there in 2016. So you saw President Trump's first, 3 debate performances in at least the general election. Was there any trend in this one that was different than the ones that you recalled from 2016?
Sure. So for at least something that was similar in 2016 and during the first debate compared to this first one, this time around, there was the mention of Trump taxes. Whether Trump paid taxes was an issue in 2016. And of course, now it's also another issue given the recent reporting from the New York Times. So those two issues remained at the center, but there does seem to have been more substance in 2016 compared to this year, where it was just constant interruptions and hard to really hear the policy being promoted.
Yeah, I would agree. It seemed to have taken like a warp in at least substantive policy, certainly more into character. Fred and Sue, do you see? You know, there was a lower viewership for this first debate in 2020 than there was for 2016, which was kind of counter to what some of us were thinking as, you know, we were getting into this election. And I'm not sure what to make of that. It might be that people have already made up their mind they don't need to see anymore, or it could be that maybe they're turned off from the whole thing. And I'm wondering, what camp would you two sit in?
Well, I think Fred will probably back me up on this with some actual statistics, but in the midterm election, we saw that the white female college-age voter didn't turn out to the degree that she did in the 2016 election, and that was a component of how Trump won. And what many people who have been polled, many women who have been polled, white college-age women who voted for Trump, have said that they have been really turned off by the nature of the way that Donald Trump communicates. So, you know, I wouldn't make a leap that that means they're not necessarily going to vote for him this time around. But there's only so much Donald Trump I think even a Donald Trump fan can take. So if you're watching him every day when he was doing the COVID news conferences, if you don't like his style, which even people who support him will tell you, I wish he wasn't on Twitter, I wish he wouldn't talk that way. I think that this may, the lower viewership may have to do with who was on TV, less than I'm not interested in the presidential election.
And the point I would make about all that too is, you know, one, I question whether or not the numbers are accurate on how TV viewership is even being done. The NBA Finals ratings are down. Major League Baseball's ratings were down. The NHL playoffs ratings were down. The NFL has started so far with ratings down. And I think that's because people aren't watching the things on television, and we may not have a way to capture how everyone else is getting it. My neighbor, I could see him through the window, was watching the debate on his computer. He should have shut his blinds, but he was definitely watching it on his computer. Is he captured somehow? So I think that's why the numbers are down. It's only old people like me that still have cable. So, you know, that's how you can keep track of me. You know, and I would also say, I think there's a you know, in a crazy like a fox way strategy to what Trump was doing. I think to Sue's point about, you know, who's turning out, I think this race is going to come down to whether or not Trump can attract any other non-educated white males that didn't vote in 2016. Are there just any more out there that can put him over the top? And I think for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, is the excitement of Kamala Harris on the ticket enough to squeak out just a few more votes outside of Milwaukee and right outside of Detroit? And Sue, you wanted me to have a fact. I guess I'd give one fact, which is, and Miriam, you can tell me if this fact is right, but you know, in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost many precincts in Michigan by just 3 votes. So if you can turn those people just by 3, you have a chance of winning the state. And that's what the Biden campaign will look at for Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, you know, Minnesota, all of the upper Midwest.
I would say also Trump's goal is to keep some people home and keep some people disenfranchised and have some people turned off by the process to that point, because some of those areas in the swing state which voted for Obama heavily and either didn't vote for Hillary or didn't vote in the same numbers, those are the people that need to turn out to vote for Biden-Harris to win. And if Trump is making it seem like your vote's not going to count, or the process is rigged, or all of those things, that's a way to nibble at the edges of the electorate to get to victory.
And obviously, with the pandemic and the early voting and absentee voting processes, it'll be interesting to watch each state as they put together their system and their pluses and minuses. Obviously, states like Colorado, Arizona, Washington, Utah that have done mail balloting for years seem to have a leg up in this, but we'll see if a state like Massachusetts, which just broke a record for basically their primary just last month, will have that type of turnout for the general election. But let's flip now to, so we're up in New Hampshire, and I think there's a drastic difference or an important difference between 2016 and 2020. And you see in New Hampshire, it was really close in 2016. In fact, it was the closest for a Republican since Bush won it, George Bush won it in 2000. So it'd been basically 20 years. And you had candidates like Mitt Romney and John McCain, who were fairly moderate candidates. They would lose to Obama by 4 or 5 points up in the state. John Kerry carried the state. So all of a sudden in 2016, it was interesting that New Hampshire tightened up as opposed to, you know, Massachusetts, which kind of expanded for Clinton. And we know that this year the Democrats put a lot of money into New Hampshire. They've now out-registered Republicans for the first time in a decade. And if we jump to our next slide, we'll take a look at our poll results. And you'll notice that Joe Biden in this poll has a 7-point lead. And you might say to yourself, Spence, I remember your polling. I remember Emerson polling in 2016. And I could have sworn Clinton had a very similar lead. And if we jump to the next slide, you'll see we kind of give you that trajectory of what happened. So this is our 2016 polling in New Hampshire. And if you look, there is 2 third-party candidates, Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. And you don't really, we do have third-party candidates, but not of the stature, in my opinion, of Gary Johnson. But if you look at the Gary Johnson vote, he's taking 14% and 10% up until basically the last 3 weeks before the election. And that vote starts to melt. Where does that vote melt to? As we can see, it melts over to Trump. He starts taking his 36. If you watch, Johnson goes down to 6. Trump comes up. And Clinton takes a little bit from Stein, but her numbers stay pretty steady. And it was the melt, in my opinion, off of Johnson that gives that movement, as opposed to this time where you see a 7-point lead. That melt needs to come directly, basically, from Biden. And it's a tougher take from the other side as opposed to the third party, which could almost be a placeholder. And so I'd like to hear your reaction to, do you find that maybe the dynamics of this race, we talk about states like Michigan, Wisconsin, these are states that go by 10,000 votes, 60,000 votes. Does that third party remember, third parties took about 7 million votes last time. Do you see that having an impact? Do we think that that vote has already been separated out? Be interested to hear thoughts on that movement. And then secondarily, it would be interesting to hear, it seems like the Republicans have put up the more ideological candidate. The Democrats have put up the moderate, which is kind of different than what we've seen in the past, and if that would have an impact as well.
You know, I'd love to see a poll asking the third-party voters if they were going to vote anyway, because that's always the challenge to me when looking at the results. Were these Jill Stein voters? Were these Johnson voters? Were they going to go to the poll if their candidate wasn't there? You know, I'm always curious to what their commitment to voting in general is, or are those 5% in New Hampshire from 2016 in the final election? Are they just going to stay home, or are they going to go with the other third party candidate? I mean, I know it doesn't give us a lot of bang for our buck when we poll that like that narrow, but that's the thing that at 3 o'clock in the morning, I wonder, who are those Jill Stein people going to vote for, really, if Jill wasn't on the ballot, or who are they going to vote?
Yeah, and I would say a couple things by looking at these numbers. I think the difference in 2016 is, at the time, Donald Trump was still new to the scene. He didn't have a record yet. He was blowing politics up. So there was some interest there. Hillary Clinton was really well known, had high negatives that she tried to overcome. We didn't know what Trump's high negatives were just yet, because he vanquished the Republican field. Coming into this election, Trump's favorability ratings are low. Joe Biden doesn't have such low numbers. He also cleared the field so much sooner than 2016, where people felt bitter about Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton fighting it out. And so people were kind of looking for alternatives. In this case, there hasn't been an alternative now for months. And so you really have, and I also feel like, because you're not seeing rallies on TV every day, and because you're not going out and having a chance to actually interact with them, the race is staying very static. So if you like somebody because of what you've read or seen, that's who you're staying with.
I think too that the fact that, of course, the pandemic is grounding everyone, and that might have lessened the opportunity for third-party candidates to try to put their voice out there, campaign, and the resources may be more diminished compared to previous years. So I think that the overall impact of the pandemic too probably will have a significant weight compared to the trends we saw leading up to the election day in 2016.
Miriam, if I can come back to the thought or kind of Sue raised, did you find that more people were coming to your website this debate, did you have any potential statistics on traffic, what people were looking for compared to previous debates, just to kind of get a level of engagement from our
Sure.
viewers?
We don't quite yet have, I'm not quite sure what the 2016 metric was compared to this year, but we definitely do see a spike on election debate night and the day after. Tuesday and Wednesdays we saw significant spikes in traffic. So we think that, even though there's concern that, people have already made up their minds, they have their own set of facts that they stick to, we do still think that there is that seek for the truth. There is still that interest in finding out whether Trump or Biden were really accurate on something. So we do see that there's definitely that interest in fact checking, and we see that spike happen, on debate night and on our social media feeds and the day after as well.
And I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if you have the answer, but if you recall in the debate, there was a moment where Biden said somebody said something and Trump said who? And all of a sudden, a little sheepishly, he looks up and he says, Kellyanne Conway. Can you tell us if that was true or not?
I'll have to check, but I believe it was, because I think it was in one of our items that we fact checked, and I have Trump said, I don't think Kellyanne Conway said that, speaking about riots, chaos, and violence. We found out that she did during a Fox and Friends interview in August. So Trump was wrong about that.
I mean, that's actually a pretty good bet. If someone challenges you, who said that, you could say Kellyanne Conway and probably be right 92% of the time.
And to add seriousness to that, I would say that was probably also Joe Biden's strategy. He was constantly trying to say that somebody in Donald Trump's orbit in the administration was saying something, and he was trying to get the president to disagree, to say that he doesn't believe in X. So that also probably was practiced or thought about, who said some of these crazy things, and let's pin the president down on them.
And so, we'll talk about New Hampshire and some of these other key states. New Hampshire kind of came up on the radar for us after the New York Times poll a couple of weeks ago, where they put the race at 3. We were thinking it would be closer to what we actually found. But, there'll be a lot of movement, and there's ranges in surveys. So we'll obviously keep an eye on New Hampshire, but what many of us have mentioned, we have these other states in play, particularly Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. We've got Senate races around the country. Miriam, do you have the opportunity to fact check around the country, or is the resources limited to kind of presidential and top tier races?
Our focus is, we actually do have several congressional races for House and Senate that are considered toss-ups that we're monitoring closely. Of course, we follow Trump and Biden, daily, but we also have dedicated staff that our focus is beyond Trump, beyond Biden. We have our own states that we're monitoring. So thankfully, we're able to continue that. We did that during the midterms election in 2018 as well. And we're happy that we can continue, of course, checking them out this time around, because they're of course also monumental. And we hear a lot of the claims too that Trump says, for instance, are echoed a lot by Republicans who are running for Senate or for the House. If they're trying to align themselves with Trump, we see them repeat those claims. So that gives us an opportunity to fact check both at the same time.
And that raises an interesting, because what we saw in 2016, where generally speaking, the senators that won in Republican state where Trump won, and senators in won where Clinton won. So like New Hampshire went with the Democrats and Clinton won the state. Arizona went with McCain and Trump won the state. Do you see, Sue, Fred, do you see that pattern continuing with these races, or do you think the president or Trump will have coattails? Will Biden have coattails for some of the down ballot and top tier races?
It's really hard to predict that without being able to see a lot of the on the ground people interactions. I mean, we don't even have people going door to door. I know the Biden campaign today came out and said we're going to slowly start reintroducing people to go knocking door to door. I think without being able to talk to voters regularly. I mean, I know you're doing it through the polling, but like without the campaigns being able to talk to voters, you can't figure out, I think, if that's going to happen. I mean, I think in general, some, political sort of history is that people like having checks and balances. So they like a divided government. I guess it depends on how upset people are about having Republicans control the Senate and the presidency at the same time. I wonder, it might be interesting, Spencer, at some point to figure out some polling around how do people feel about what they're trying to do with the Supreme Court seat, and what does that mean? If they feel like they're trying to jam it in, people might vote some of those folks out to prove a point. If people are happy about that, they may keep them in.
Yeah, it is interesting that for basically Trump's third election, so 2016, 2018, 2020, one of the planks in the part of the platform is the Supreme Court for each one. Do you think that's a benefit for Trump? Do you think having the Supreme Court in 2016 as part of the campaign, in 2018 he had the Kavanaugh, which may have cut both ways. Now he's got Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat, and that might cut both ways. Any thoughts on how the Supreme Court is going to play, as it did in 2016? Some thought a pivotal role to kind of see past some of Trump's issues and looking at the importance of the court.
Yeah, the reason why a whole swath of Republicans and conservatives and conservative Democrats are able to vote for Trump when they probably would be repulsed by him is because of what he's able to deliver on the federal judges across the country, the Supreme Court. I mean, if you're a conservative who is looking to have a larger conservative voice both on the Supreme Court and on the federal level, Trump has been a major success. He's been one of the most successful presidents in doing that. And that is a change that is going to have an impact for generations, right? We're not just even talking for the next few years. A Supreme Court, putting someone on the Supreme Court of a young age, that's a 40-year at least impact, and all of the federal judgeships, and these are issues that impact people in their daily lives, right? The Supreme Court and the way that it impacts everybody's daily life and the federal court system. So I think that it's an energizing motivator for some conservatives and some Republicans who may not at all like Trump, may not at all like a number of his policies, his international policies, his trade policies, but are excited about having a conservative judicial system, for the next generation.
Do you think that's going to be enough to carry him into a second term, or getting this seat filled prior to the term? Would people say, well, you got 3, that's enough? Or do you see that the Republicans are going to want more potentially?
I think that they'll want more. I think it's cover for them to vote for him if they were waffling about voting for him or not voting at all.
Yeah, they'll always want more. He even said it in the debate. You left me so many empty slots. People want those filled, and this is something that the Republican Party, to their credit, have been doing for a generation. And they're finally seeing the fruits of that work, and now getting to nominate all these people and put them on the court.
It was interesting though. So they get the court, and back in 2016, what candidate Trump was talking a lot about, particularly in those debates with Clinton, was abortion and Roe v. Wade. And it was interesting in this last debate, when the issue of Roe v. Wade came up, all of a sudden that was not on the ticket for 2020. And he really backed off from that. I presume that's because he's looking at, the suburban vote potentially.
I actually thought he was confused when he said it wasn't on the ballot. I think he really thought it wasn't on the ballot. I don't think that he was looking at it as an ideological issue, that it's on the ballot because the Supreme Court's open. And I really took him at his word on that one.
That's true. He could be literal and be like, the ballot is me and you, Joe.
I see.
Could be.
Well, you never know. Miscommunication. We sometimes try to read between the lines, and that's where we can make some mistakes. But in this last slide, as you take a look here in New Hampshire, look what happened as far as the vote totals of 2008 and 2012 that Obama was able to reach. Clinton runs a good race, and she runs a pretty good race around the country if you use John Kerry numbers. But you got to remember, Barack Obama shattered the voting record in 2008. He shattered it so badly that he came up 5 million votes short in 2012. So it's a very high standard for even, like a Joe Biden to try to catch up on. Do you see that Obama coalition coming back now in 2020 after it has basically been gone since 2012?
I mean, I would say this is something that the Democrats have, I was involved in the 2008 election. I was in the administration during 2012. What I would tell you is that the Democratic Party has been looking at the demographics of this country. I mean, you could actually argue the George W. Bush administration was looking at the demographics of this country changing and seeing that whites eventually were not going to be the minority. And there was a real effort to bring together all the other minorities who will become the majority. And if we can convince them to vote for Barack Obama, then we've got it. And then that coalition will just stay together in perpetuity. And I mean, you see it didn't even stay together completely for 2012. It sort of fell apart in 2016. And, I actually am surprised that Joe Biden didn't sort of embrace Barack Obama more in the debate to keep that coalition going. I think there's still, people are hesitant to change. And I think the fact that there's eventually this seismic shift going to change in the way people are, registered to vote. I think the whites are still the majority at the moment. And Trump tapped into that in 2016 in a way that Hillary Clinton just assumed maybe that they could keep the Obama coalition together.
To your point, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Iowa, that whole Midwestern, you're looking at a roughly 90% white turnout in those states. And so, yes, there's diversity in lots of parts of the country, and there's different types of diversity. But as far as racial makeup goes, those areas of the country are significantly different than, let's say, the Sun Belt region. So we have a question from our participants, and we're going to come back to some other questions. But the one that our participant wants to know is any suggestions, maybe from Sue, what Steve Scully can do in 2 weeks on that debate stage. We're going to have, I believe we're going to have another debate. We have the vice presidential debate on Thursday, and then we'll have the presidential debates coming back at us. Any recommendations, thoughts?
Chris Wallace, the only thing that I think Chris Wallace did was that he was surprised that Donald Trump showed up. Who knew Donald Trump was going to act like that? What a surprise. I think everyone feels for him. Being a moderator is a terrible job under any circumstances. I try to avoid it as often as possible, although I'm doing one next week. This next, it's a town meeting. So that's different. And everybody behaves differently when they're with people they don't know, right? So Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to be in some sort of audience with real human beings, real citizens, and that public pressure, that psychological pressure to behave, I think will be on him. And listen, if I were advising President Trump, I would just tell him to get out of Joe Biden's way, right? I agree with Fred that Joe Biden did not launch very strongly in the debate. And had Trump just let Joe Biden talk, who knows what we'd be talking about today? Because Joe, I kept seeing him grab for that thread, and then it would, oh, there it goes. So if I think that remember that both campaigns agree to the rules, and they agree to how they're going to do this. So I'm hoping that they adhere to them. I think the format will give Trump a chance to reset a bit. And also, it's a great time for Biden because he's great with the one-on-one. But the rules are going to be a little bit lax in a different way because of the format. So I just wish him luck, and it's a job nobody wants.
It'll be interesting to see, too, what kind of changes the commission makes. They have announced that there will be an attempt to make it more engaging in a way that we can hear both sides more clearly state their policies. So I think it'll be interesting to see in the coming days what changes they make and how the candidates abide by them.
Well, and I would say the communications professional in me, right before I got online, I went to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Fox News, and CNN just to see what the headlines were in case there was any breaking news that we needed to talk about at this debate. And the headline in the Post was that Donald Trump said he won't agree to any changes in the debate. And I wonder if, as a political aide, coming out of that first debate, I was immediately thinking Joe Biden should not attend the next two debates. He should not give Donald Trump a chance to just spew all this stuff for an hour and give him free airtime. And then I realized, well, the attack would be like, you're afraid to fight me. So that wouldn't work either. But I wonder now, after reading those quick headlines today, is Donald Trump setting the situation up where he won't participate in the debate? And I wonder if he won't participate in the debate because where I give Donald Trump like high marks is he has figured out, unlike any other president has figured out, how to talk unfiltered to his audience. He skips the media. He puts things directly out on Twitter. He has interviews with friendly sources. He's got his own channels. And why, if I'm Donald Trump and people think I might have lost that debate or I seem out of control, why would I want to do two more when I can say, the commission is trying to screw me. You know that the whole Washington establishment is against me. I'm not doing these debates. I'm going to go off and hold rallies, and the media will still cover it. I wonder if that's a strategy.
I think too, a lot of the things he said at the debate were repeats of what he says at the rallies. For instance, the attacks on Hunter Biden, we hear them at when we review the tape for the rallies, and it came back up during the debate. So there seems to be a continuum of talking points that he brought onto the debate.
It's a interesting, just the style that he'll use in that on that debate stage. It was a little stronger than what we recall in 2016, but 2016 was not a normal situation either. Those of us who have broken down that debate, if we've been able to go back and watch it. But again, a lot of people after those debates, as Fred said at the beginning of our program tonight, they said that Clinton won. I remember looking at polls afterwards, 20-point victory.
Conway, by chance to quote Kellyanne Conway said on MSNBC after the last debate, well, I'm going to be on vacation soon because basically she implied he's not going to win because of Hillary Clinton's debate performance.
And what is it with voters that the debate might not have that type of impact? I mean, that's the moment where you see the two candidates. But we've been saying, and I was talking with Peter before, that the research suggests that the debates really don't carry much weight. There's a lot of gravitas because of Kennedy-Nixon back in 1960, and some would argue that 1980 was the one debate would have a tremendous impact. Do we think that these debates will have any impact moving forward?
I would argue that because campaigns now are running so far ahead and so far early, I mean, do you have to watch a debate to know where Joe Biden and Donald Trump stand on the issues? I mean, they've been vetted by the people of Iowa, New Hampshire, other, Nevada, South Carolina. They've been doing media interviews. They've been talking to donors. People sort of know where they are. I mean, I think people watch the debates to see if they're going to make mistakes or if it's going to turn into a circus like it did. But I don't think people are watching that debate to be like, wow, this is the first time I've really heard about these guys. Let me find out more about them. And I think that's just the media cycle and the fact that campaigns have to start so early to raise money and start building an infrastructure in all the states.
We might see something new. I mean, the next time around, maybe it'll be a TikTok dance-off. I don't know. That might sway.
Might improve viewership of the younger audience, perhaps. And so, Miriam, any final thoughts on the debate, or at least on the debates moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, we always look forward to it. I mean, we spend our time fact checking, and we are always excited to see what new claims we hear. And from a fact checking standpoint, we always try to follow up the next day, because there are claims, they surprise us sometimes when they say something that we haven't fact checked or we haven't heard on the campaign trail. So we spend the next few days trying to fact check that statement, because if it's new, we know that they'll continue repeating it going forward. So we look forward to fact checking the next debate and the vice presidential debate too coming up.
And one last question is, as far as there's a big question right now about Hispanic voters and the get out of the Hispanic vote. I saw Telemundo Univision had about 2.5 million views for the debate, which was down. But as Fred has pointed out, there's other factors maybe involved there. Do you see, and open to the floor for our final question, do you see a minority group like Hispanics coming out without an issue to get them out to the polls as they had in maybe 2016 with Clinton and the idea of the Dreamers Act?
I think that the pandemic is still an issue that for across all groups really is one of the most significant matters. I mean, it affects so many aspects of education, of the jobs, and just being able to carry out, their lives as they used to before the pandemic. So I think the response to the pandemic may be a driving issue, but of course also the Supreme Court and whether, the kind of nominee that President Trump has put forward. And I think there may be a lot of support for him from conservatives for sure, based on his nomination.
I think this year we're going to see the largest Hispanic Latina turnout in history for a presidential election, and we're going to learn a lot about issues that drive, as we all know, it's not a monolith, and there's a variety of opportunities for the parties. After Mitt Romney's loss, the Republican Party had a plan, as Fred was talking about, to get out and speak to that community and engage them and make them Republicans. Bernie Sanders has had an enormous amount of victory with the Hispanic and Latino community during the primaries. So I think what we're going to see is a much more sticky, engaged community. We'll see where they vote when it comes to the presidential election. But I think looking forward to engagement, I think it's a watershed moment for the Hispanic and Latino electorate this time.
And I would just say, from working on campaigns, yes, agreed. No group is a monolith and they'll all vote the same. I actually wouldn't even be looking so much at race or ethnicity. I'd be looking at what the issues are campaigns now with cell phone data and people giving so much data on social media can really drill down on who their voter is and develop a profile on that voter, and then find other people in that network to be someone that will vote with them. So if it were me, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at Hispanics per se. I'd be like, I need 2,000 more votes right outside of Milwaukee. How do I get it? Who are those people?
And do they need a ride?
And one last question, because we got them in the audience. I know we're running out. We're coming up to a hard break. But the last question is, are there a shy Trump vote that is not being accounted for in these polls that you think might come out on election day and give a November surprise to the president?
There was in the last election.
Do you think there still are, or have they, or is it more or less?
Yeah, I think, again, this is the paranoid political aide in me thinking that the other side is much more organized than I am. But I think there are plenty of people out there who ultimately, right at the last minute, are going to be like, I like the judges, or I like the tax cut, or, I like sort of, where things are, I like that the economy is rebounded. I believe there'll be a vaccine soon, and they'll pull the lever for Trump. That I think they don't show up in polling as much as your students are out there doing it, they might not be showing up.
Very good. Well, I really want to thank you all, Miriam, Sue, Fred. Thank you so much for taking the time as alums to give back to college. Thank you all for coming on a Thursday night to watch a discussion that hopefully raises the political dialogue here. And really thanks to Emerson College and the alumni group for sponsoring this, and everybody who has made this possible. So thank you, and we look forward to the next rendition